Karen Glasser here, and welcome to Karen Glasser Live, interviews with brilliant thought leaders and all of the creative voices of today. I invite you to tune in weekly to the show featuring leading voices from around the world. So whether you're here live or on replay, make sure you say hi in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Today we have a great show for you. We are welcoming Shari Foos to the show. Shari is a marriage and family therapist and the creator of The Narrative Method. She also co-founded Bridge in 1999, a free university program in the humanities for low-income adults. She received her MS in narrative medicine from Columbia University and an MA in clinical psychology for Antioch University, Los Angeles, where she is an adjunct professor. As a sought-after expert about relationships and meaningful connection, Shari's writing and commentary have appeared in a range of online and print publications, including Real Simple, a favorite of mine, Huffington Post, Women's Health, Thrive Global, Shondaland, the LA Weekly, just to name a few. She's busy. In addition, she serves on the board of the City Kids Foundation and is the recipient of the New Directions for Veterans Community Hero Award in 2015, as well as the Antioch University Los Angeles Lifetime Achievement Award 2016. Phew! Welcome to the show. Here we go.
Hey,
I'm exhausted.
you know what? I'm exhausted looking at you. You are a powerhouse.
Wow. I'm really excited that you're on today because you talk about stories. Stories is all about what you are about. And today we're building bridges one story at a time. So I think it just makes sense before we jump into the whole thing. Let's talk about your story, how you became you, and what was the beginning of your journey.
I think it started when my parents had sex, and I don't like to think about that. So forgetting that, as far as I know, and this is actually a great question because when we think about what develops us,
Mm-hmm.
everything from the time we are in vitro to the time that we are about 5 years old is usually beyond our memory. And that's obviously because our brains aren't mature enough. We don't have schemas in which to file concepts or experiences. So, good or traumatic, what happens to us in our early lives is something that we don't have access to. So we have to sort of go back and put the story together. Many times we do it as a child, and then as an adult with a broader perspective, we do it.
So that's where you came from. And that's where you are now here today, which brought us to the narrative method. So first, let's talk about what the narrative method is. I'm going to put the website up just so people can go check it out later on. But what is the narrative method?
Well, the narrative method is part of the human connection movement, and it was conceived as a way to connect people deeply in a world where we are so isolated and disconnected and online and all of this stuff that really takes a toll on our humanity. And the worst part about the isolation that occurs is that we wind up feeling that it's us. If you don't talk to anybody, it's just like ping pong your ideas back in your own head.
Right.
You can't help but get disconnected from what is really true for you as well as others.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
I think one of the main reasons I've been a therapist for a long time, and I think the process of psychotherapy is fantastic. However, there's nothing like the power of a group.
Mhm.
When you're talking to one person intimately, it's wonderful. We can really support each other and help each other see who each of us really is. But when you're talking to a group, you get perspective.
Yes.
So if we're sitting in a group, particularly if people are different from us and we might not have otherwise met them, but now they're talking about something we really relate to. Maybe it's something that we feel shame about or something that we've struggled with. And you start to realize, wait a minute, it's not just about me. And that unveils the culprit. I don't think most people have psychological defects. I think a few people are perhaps, personality disorders or
Right.
mentally ill in one way or another. But most of us are responding in a normal, predictable way to a crazy world. So rather than pathologizing us, this one's got OCD, this one's got ADD, ADHD, blah, 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 all of these letters are not equivalent to what a person is. And so it's really important to separate ourselves from
Mhm.
what's happened to us and what's been told to us in order to discover for ourselves who we really are.
And I have to believe that once that starts to happen and people realize they're not alone and it's just not them that's feeling this, it is I just have to imagine it's a feeling of okay,
It is.
now I can step forward, and that's powerful. Now, part of what you talk about is the cult of culture.
Mhm.
First of all, I love that expression. I can make up in my own head what that might mean, but I think that you need to tell us what it means.
Well, the cult of culture is probably what it sounds like. It is the constant onslaught from media, social media, advertising, television, films, all of these influences
Mhm.
that, among other things, teach us all that we're not good enough. And we all get that message.
Yeah.
And, no matter how aware you are of it, you can't completely um, get rid of it because it's not going to stop. And so much of it is in very deep. Before we became language users. So when ideas or traumatic ideas come to you in pictures, as they do, then it's very hard to decipher what is really there behind it.
So you help people through the narrative method. And one of the things that you do that I think is so wonderful is you have programs that are open to the community and they're free, right? And so again, I'm putting up the website, but if they go there, they can sign up for a Tuesday program, right? Or for a Sunday program. Let's talk a little bit about what they're going to get because it's so valuable. And I think just for a place to gather in a group, as you said, this is going to do it. So let's talk about that. What are they going to do if they sign up on a Tuesday night?
It's actually Thursday. You could sign up on Tuesday, you'll be by yourself.
No,
But
I'm going to be in a group.
On Thursday nights, we meet for 75 minutes, and people come from all over, and that's the greatest thing about Zoom. So, what we do is we will look at an inspiring video. It could be any subject from social conformity to science to just fabulously interesting, timely things. And based on that short video, I'll give the group a prompt, and they go into breakout rooms and share whatever story it evokes. It's not that it has to be the most important story, but the fact that it was evoked by this is interesting for us as individuals. And regardless of what we're talking about, the other people get a sense of us so much more so than if we talk about where we're from or our favorite color or other things that, like, who's got time for? So there's no small talk. It's all big talk and it's satisfying. On Sundays, we do the Sunday morning write, and that is an hour of short form writing that is super fun. You can be a professional writer, you could have never touched a pen before. It's all the same, and we finish with no longer than one page and share it with each other and the group. And it's just a wonderful way to connect and get your thoughts out on paper.
So, is this something that people can come to once, or is it something
Oh,
that
yeah.
you find out that they come once and they love it so much they can come back again and again and again?
People typically come repeatedly,
Yeah, yeah.
but there's no pressure. And I should also say that in all of our groups, we have a very strong, no mandatory sharing rule because nobody should share things that they haven't processed or they're not comfortable opening up about. And that is just so important to hang on to our right to open up to the extent that we want to.
So important, so important. One of these days, I'm going to jump in and write.
Oh,
I'm one of those people that say I can't write, and I know that that's not true. I know that we all can write. We just have to maybe have the right prompt and the right idea and the right thought. And that's why I think this is so exciting. What you're doing. You also have some major thoughts about humanity, right? Um, and maybe the lack thereof, or the fact that we do. And you actually say you don't need a license to use your humanity. First of all, I love that. Anyone can do it. You don't have to go out and get a license. But not
exactly.
everyone does it, though, right? Not everyone practices humanity. Why do you think that is?
I think we're generally not invited to think deeply and to share deeply. We tend to believe that it's so dangerous to be vulnerable. And it can be dangerous to be vulnerable, which is why I'm saying make sure that you feel comfortable sharing. But on the other hand, if you don't share your vulnerability, who you really are, how can people know you? And if they don't know you, how can they love you? And if you're not loved, how can you feel connected? So we have to take a leap in order to really touch each other in ways that give us all meaning and mutual understanding.
It's actually, I talk to people all the time about being vulnerable and
Mhm.
about showing your vulnerability. I myself had an experience when I started to grow my hair out on camera from pitch black to white. I was very vulnerable. I mean, I literally was showing people something that I had kept hidden for 30 years. And an interesting thing happened. It changed the trajectory of my whole streaming career
Wow.
because I was vulnerable and people finally after years felt that they can connect to me.
Wow.
And so I can attest to that personally, but and that's why I tell people and that's why I teach exactly that. Show people who you are because if you don't, they're not going to want to watch your show. They're not going to want to connect with you. They're not going to want to have anything to do with you because because of that. So thank you for that. Do you have mentors?
I have had some therapists that were really helpful to my life, but if I have a mentor now, I would say it's my husband, Richard, who has taught me so much about love, and not in a lecture form, but by his example. He's so kind, and I came from a really rough childhood, and it forced me to go deep inside myself and think very introspectively.
Wow.
And but as a result of all that, I had a lot of defenses, and I've always had tremendous confidence and tremendous insecurity living side by side. And I think that, one of the problems that we all struggle with when we have something we're working on is the idea that we are a monolithic thing. We have zillions of parts and they live together. And when you can really see yourself as a multitude of parts and aspects, you no longer have to get down on yourself for those that are weaker. Because the truth is, our weaknesses are usually caused from wounds. And when you punish someone for having a wound, it's not that effective.
No.
So, yeah. So
So why do you do this? Why do you do what you do?
I think because I can imagine a better world, because I know what it feels like to be put down and told that you'll never be anything, constantly. And I really identify with underdogs, with oppressed people, with poor people, and with people who have overcome, because everyone has to overcome, everyone has trauma. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that influencers or people who are successful or famous or talented, as though they've overcome all of these kinds of things. But there's none of that. Life is a series of hurdles and some wonderful plateaus. And I think what we have to do, and this is what I try and do in my work, is teach people tools so that they don't have to linger too long in the pain and can see a broader perspective on things.
Oh, wow. Well, as we're kind of getting out of a pandemic, kind of right now, you talk about the global epidemic of isolation, uh,
Yeah.
and that's ongoing, right? That is just ongoing. And you talk about the challenging of the cult of culture to revise our stories about this. Um, and I think that isolation would you and you're the therapist. I'm married to one, but you're the therapist. I think that isolation at this time in this day and age, because of the pandemic and because of the global epidemic of everything else going on, it causes mental illness. It causes the us to have the feeling like there's a mental illness going in us, whether we do or we don't. What do you tell people? How do they deal with that? I mean, do they immediately pick up their phone and find a therapist, or do they talk to their best friend, or do they come to the narrative method? How do we get out of this?
And I'm really glad you mentioned that because the first thing we think is, I'm so effed up. Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
And you don't really want people to see you like that, especially when you go to social media and all you have are beautiful, happy people with the perfect family. And it's depressing. It's depressing for me.
Right.
So I would say that, first of all, before you judge yourself, take a step back and ask yourself objectively, what are these factors? And try and separate yourself from the things that have happened to you so that you can stay connected to who you really are. If you've been going through the pandemic and you're isolated and you're depressed and you just feel lost and your whole life was sort of thrown up into the air, is that a mental illness? Or did you cause the pandemic? It's so, so important. It's not to say that we don't need help.
Right.
And that help is our individual choice. If you want to go to a therapist, that's wonderful. We know that that's really effective. If you'd rather talk to a friend, if you'd rather journal, the main thing I would say is, in staying connected to ourselves, we have the empowerment to realize what we feel we want right now, what we feel we need.
Mhm.
So there's no one size fits all because we're not all the same. And once we start making peace with how we are different, and some of those factors are things of great pride, and some of them are disappointing. I'm not that great,
Yeah.
but we're all not that great, and we're fine.
Yeah. Very, very true. Thank you. Thank you for that. Do you have a tip you want to share with our audience right now?
I like to give 25%. Um, that's just a tip. Okay. If I had a little tip right now, I would share with you the image of a rocket ship speeding into space at a zillion miles an hour. If it changes its trajectory by 1 degree, it's going somewhere else. And I think when we're frustrated or in pain, we just want it to end, of course. But when we broaden out our perspective and see, you're not going from A to Z all in one fell swoop,
Right.
but one step, one small step is important, it's impactful, and it's all any of us can do. So to just hang on to the fact that taking a small step and accepting some progress, because, progress isn't like that either. It's up
Right.
to down 75, up 41, down 36.
Right.
All of our lives have that frustration. When you don't share that experience with other
Mm.
people, you think it's you. When
Yeah.
you share it with other people, the light goes on. Oh, this is just a
Yeah.
bummer in the human condition.
Exactly. Exactly. I always like to ask my guests, and it's really from no other, just for me, because I am always looking for a good book to read. What was the last good book that you read?
Actually, somebody just gave me a book called, ah, I don't know where it went. It's something in thin in the title, and they said to me, it's just like the Cult of Culture. I'll see if I can find it before we end.
And if you don't, we'll put it in the comments so that
Yeah.
people will be able to see it. I'm always about a good book. I want to let people know how they can find you. We already put up your website, and there's a lot of really great reading there. Believe it or not,
Mhm.
stories, right? And just a lot of things to do. You can also sign up for the Thursday and a Sunday program. Sherry is also on Twitter at Narrative Method. You're also on Facebook and Instagram, and that's the Narrative Method. Um, first of all, I want to thank you.
Mhm.
uh, you you epitomize, I think, in our world right now where we need to be going. We
Mhm.
need to be telling our stories. We need to be listening to each other. And I think that the more we listen to each other and our stories, the better our world's going to be.
I agree. And one thing I would add about listening is that the skill that we teach is, when you're listening to someone's story, put yourself aside. By the way, when you put yourself aside, it's kind of like going on a stage. You
Hmm.
put aside your pain, your worries, you're liberated. And everyone knows that experience of listening exquisitely to someone else. It's fascinating.
Yep.
When you listen to someone's story, from their perspective, not based on your assumptions or your associations. It's really easy to understand people, even people who have done things that are awful.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear their perspective and their logic, even if it was out of misperception or a wound or rage or any of that, we can imagine that emotion. We all have the same emotions to different degrees at different times. And when you can tap into the truth of your darker emotions as well as your loving emotions,
Right.
we can be there for each other and help people find a way. If we can't be rehabilitated, what's the point?
I agree. I agree. Thank you for being here with us today. For all of our viewers, you want to make sure that you follow Karen Glasser. You can check us out on Roku. Go to channelstore.roku.com and look for Karen Glasser Live. You can check us out on our website, www.karenGlasser.com. And finally, I'm all over the place on social media, and I mean all over the place, from Pinterest and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, and of course, Facebook. Oh, and I'm on TikTok too. So go check it out. We'd love to hear from you. Shari, thank you. We want to thank our audience. You have a choice as to where you spend your time. You chose to spend it with us today, and we are eternally grateful. So thank you. Go out and give somebody an awesome day, and we'll see you next time on the next